My name is Jack Wickman, 69 years old. I live in Houston. First, let me say that I wouldn't be sitting here today, 6 weeks post-op after a total hip replacement, feeling the way I feel, pain-free, completely active, completely mobile, if it wasn't for the good folks at BoneSmart and the work of some really outstanding surgeons. A little bit about my story. I had a total right hip replacement done back on January 31st, like I said, about 6 weeks ago. My recovery has been remarkable, fast, pain-free, and complete. Not everybody gets the same results. I consider myself very, very fortunate. My onset was very, very sudden. For years I'd been troubled with minor aches and pains that came and went, both hips, sometimes my legs, and I just chalked them off to old age. Now, I'm a very active person, hunt, fish, love my sailboats, love my sailing. What I found was, as time went on, up to about maybe a year or so ago, the pain started concentrating in my right hip. I found it difficult to walk, I found it difficult to sleep. The pain was consistent, not agonizing, but consistent. I really didn't want to do very much. Without realizing it, my lifestyle was slipping away from me. Didn't even want to walk the dog around the block. Finally, last summer, what I think convinced me that there was something seriously wrong here. I had made a trip to Europe with my friend Linda, my son, my daughter-in-law, and my 3-year-old grandson. And we'd be sitting outside some historic location, and I'd be telling them, will you folks go inside and look around? I think I'll just sit here. That's where it had gotten to. I didn't want to do anything. I had to plan every move in advance. The pain was getting worse and worse. Again, not the kind that would knock you flat, although I did fall down, and that was a wake-up call. Finally, I went to see my family doctor. He took one look at me and referred me to a specialist. Now eventually the work was done at Memorial City Hospital here in Houston by a team of really outstanding surgeons. Anyway, he referred me to a specialist, and the diagnosis was that I had severe osteoarthritis in my right hip. And because of the condition and the state at which it had gotten, there was no alternative except for a total hip replacement. I absolutely freaked out. I've been healthy all my life. I couldn't imagine that I would need a new hip. The thought of it just drove me crazy. I started looking for every option, every alternative except that surgery. I just didn't want to face it. I got on the web, and fortunately for me, I came across BoneSmart. I found BoneSmart at first very interesting, and the more I watched, the more I learned. I hovered in the background, read a lot of posts, delved into their library, a lot of good technical information. Eventually started asking questions. It was the folks at BoneSmart that finally got some common sense into my thick head. My condition couldn't be fixed. It would only get worse, never get better. And since I already had the diagnosis, it looked like the only alternative for relief and to regain some of my life was to have that total hip done. Once I got past that denial, I started doing some more research. I talked to the doctors, I talked to the specialists. Now, I don't have a lot of fancy insurance. I have an HMO backed by Medicare here in the States, so I didn't have tons and tons of doctors available to me. Although if you're going to be sick, Houston's a good place to do it because we have got some world-class medical facilities here. Fortunately for me, within my network, I got to a specialist. I saw a couple before I decided on the final one. They were all good, but I waited until I had one that was just exactly the guy I wanted. I continued to do my research. I understood the different procedures. I knew the complications and probable outcomes. It's major surgery. There's always a risk. But I thought the risk was definitely worth taking because, frankly, my life was going nowhere. I could see myself spending the rest of my days sitting in a chair, watching TV, getting old and grumpy. And that just isn't me. Finally, after I settled on one specialist, I got real lucky. He had a cancellation in his schedule, and within a matter of 3 weeks, I was in the hospital. The procedure itself went extremely smoothly. I was in and out of the operating room in a couple of hours. That very evening, they had me up and out of bed in a walker. It hurt like heck, but at least the pain, that old bad pain, was gone. And the new pain was simply that residual stuff from the surgery itself. And I could understand that I could live with because the old pain was gone. The next day they took me to physical therapy. A session there, and guess what? They took away my walker, said I didn't need it, and I actually walked back to my room. 48 hours later, they took me in a wheelchair down to the door of the hospital. I got out of that wheelchair, picked up my own carry-on bag, and walked to the car. When I got home to the complex in which I lived and came in the front door, people who knew I was going in for an operation could not believe it. They thought the operation had been delayed. I walked in, unaided, and I was home. Ever since then, it's been great. My recovery's been virtually pain-free, with just the normal amount of pain that you would expect from healing. I've had very little limitations, I've had no restrictions, and my PT has been limited to lots of walking and some sessions on the treadmill. I overdid it at one point, like most of us do, because I felt better than I really was. But that's a small price to pay. I learned my lesson, followed the instructions. Now, the advice that I could give to anybody who finds themselves in a similar situation is this. Regardless of where you live, regardless of what's available to you, don't delay. Why suffer? Why go through months or years of agony with your life slowly slipping away around you when you can no longer do any of the things you really want to do? Take the step. Start the process. Do your research. BoneSmart is a wonderful place to learn. The library is extensive. It'll give you links to all sorts of things. Understand what options are available to you, but don't delay. The longer you wait, the worse your body's going to be. The worse shape you're in, the longer your recovery. Like I said, I'm enjoying an extremely fast and very complete recovery. Here I am, 6 weeks later, and for all intents and purposes, I'm back to where I was a couple of years ago. I wouldn't hesitate to do it all over again, even if I didn't have the kinds of facilities available to me that I have. So there's my message. Don't delay, do your research, find a surgeon that you're very, very comfortable with, and go and do it. I'm a bone smarty, and I got my life back.